Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Derek Main. It has been a very long time since I have done one of these, and I would really like to get back into a more regular habit of doing these sort of book vlogs where I talk about the books I like. But you've really got to find that sort of like motivation or whatnot to do it. And I was thinking back to 2019 when I started doing these, and it was all translated literature. And I think one that was like a unique hook that like really helped like connect me to other readers that were interested in contemporary fiction that was a little more off the beaten path. But also at that time, I did one book at a time and really gave it the focus. And um, I was not publishing at that time as a writer. I was writing, but not with an eye towards publishing. And of course, now that's become a bigger part of my life. And reading is still as big, but this moment of like making these videos can just be tougher. And then, of course, coming out of the pandemic, um, uh, just the nature of like work, and particularly like the corporate type work that I do 9 to 5 during the week is a little more hectic and intense, whereas it probably wasn't so much so in 20 and 21. So that plays a role as well. But I thought about like, why did I first do it? Like, what was it I was looking for, And I think that it was sort of twofold. Like, I wanted to connect with people because reading is lonely, writing is lonely, literature is lonely and lost, and kind of sometimes it always sort of feels like it's teetering on the edge of a kind of extinction, at least culturally, certainly within the mainstream. But I knew that there were others out there like me um, who hear the words on the page, that voice inside their head that they use to connect consciousnesses, right, from reader to writer. And I knew that would have to always exist. There would always, there would just be people who are sort of wired that way. And I wanted to find those people out there because it's lonely. And I think I've done that somewhat, right. And then the other aspect was as a sort of document of my reading life, something that even my kids could look back on one day, after I'm gone. And here's this record of these things that I love. You look back behind me, these books are, an incredibly huge part of my life. And, I can't in the marginalia write a lot in there. I think about passing them on to my kids. I want them to find their own associations and their own meanings and whatnot. And I don't want to hand that to them. And they may not be interested at all, right? But someone somewhere down the line may just be looking after they finish a book for someone to talk to them momentarily about it. And that's what I always wanted to do. And I still want to do that. I still look myself when I finish something. I always go on BookTube and check it out. I derive a lot of inspiration from several people who've been doing this a long time. I can't even name them all, but I have appreciated the folks who have kind of taken a more low-key, relaxed approach to it. Of course, as you know here, I don't do any editing. I just start talking. I press record. So I'm going to try it again. I've got 6 books today I'm going to talk about that I've read recently, and I don't have any notes or anything. I think I have a tab maybe in one of a quote that I really like. So I'm just going to talk about these books. Quickly, I will say, I think the last time that I did one of these, I read, or time before maybe, I read from my novel. And so just one more plug. This is my novel Characters from Expat Press. And there is a link in the bio to buy that. It's really hard to find readers, and I'm really proud of this work. If you like, this is a short book at, about 136 pages. But if you like metafiction, if you like autofiction and messing with form and structure of those two, if you like sort of Southern Gothic, just keep in mind that it is an intense book. There are obviously a lot of adult themes and situations. So, keep that in mind as well. All right, so yeah, done with that. I reread a favorite recently. I mean, rereading a Cesar Aira book is kind of funny, right? Because they're always one sitting reads. They're so tall, tiny here, right? And this is the Literary Conference by Cesar Aira, translated from the Spanish by Katherine Silver. This is in a beautiful No Directions copy. This is one of my favorite books, period. It is in Cesar Aria's usual style, very, very short. It's about 80 pages. And the reason I love this is it is a really perfect encapsulation of how artists, writers create and what is sort of unique and individual about you as a creative person, and how that sort of is the superpower, right? All of the experiences, all of the knowledge, all of the everything, right? That all the cultural touchstones you've consumed, they sort of completely shape like what only you are able to create. And this is a really fun, like most of Cesar Aria's books. But there's actually, it's fun, it's funny, it's kind of like, Cesar Aria starts writing and then it just like goes into these wild places. It certainly does that, but at the end, there's really much to consider in terms of what it is that his entire project, and he always kind of comes up, I feel like, every year for Nobel consideration, and probably deservedly so. Bolano, who we'll talk about in a minute, certainly loved him. Enrique Villamates, who I love, certainly loved him. There's two of his I've never read that are translated. Never Any End to Paris, which I started. This is where they're all sort of about literary addiction and whatnot. This one, the stand-in for him is a Hemingway freak, and then a brief history of portable literature, which I haven't started. But anyway, those were sort of the two. Along with Frisson, so three authors that Bolano kind of like pointed us to, right, when we were younger and we were looking for that. And so anyway, Aria, very good. It's always the one I recommend people start with. Most people will tell you Episode in the Life of a Landscape Painter, and certainly there's a few others that people might mention. I have some of his, as I've mentioned, I don't like at all, but this one I love. This is one of my favorite writers. And I read The Writing Life by Annie Dillard. Of course, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek is one of my favorite books. And this was a quiet meditation on what it means and what it is to be a writer. And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's stunning. My friend Gabriel Hart always really liked this. And I had never read it. I only read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. But it's just tremendous. And there's such a universality to these sort of remote places that she ends up living in. And the day-to-day life of a writer, where she's like making coffee in the morning, petting the cat, going on a walk, making lunch, the whole time your subconscious kind of working through whatever these problems are in the novel, the work, the article that you're working on. And it feels like such a slow pace of life, and such a sort of a frustrating life, in terms of how slow they come, how much time and mental energy you spend on a sentence or a transition or a scene, and how that there's no quick reward. Many times there's no reward whatsoever. It all stems from you. We'll get back to the lonely thing. I mean, I connected to it very much because I'm someone who, I wrote my first novel, right? Characters, and I sold maybe 100 copies or so, which is, hell, that's 100 more people that ever read my novel before, right? So it's really good. But like now I've been working on my second book for, I believe I started it in earnest in February of last year. So I've been over, a year and some months, and, taking a long, long time, but there's no one there, right, that's saying like, this is when it's due, there's no sort of giant reward at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it really is a very solitary game, and you, each day you reaffirm your belief in the thing itself by sitting down and looking at it, or talking through it, or striking a word, or adding a sentence, writing a scene. And that takes a lot of insanity in some ways. It takes a lot of a kind of dedication and commitment that is stubborn, that is narcissistic, but also giving to oneself. Like, you're really open to yourself and your signals. I'm going a little off the rails, so I'm going to stop. Hopefully some of that catches. If you write it all, The Writing Life by Annie Dillard is tremendous. I got into these phase again with the 20s and reread Sun Also Rises and some letters, short stories. And I decided to read Tinders the Night. I had never read it. Holy crap, it was good. I am not surprised. I understand why Gatsby gets all that. Tinders the Night's way better. And, I mentioned Frisson earlier. Obviously, in the first part, was it the dreamed part or the remembered part? No, the invented part of Frisson. Tinders the Night is sort of a subplot throughout, but just a fantastic book. And I really like the sort of expat 20s, like vibe, right? And there's just this sort of psychological tension underneath all of it. It's very, very good. But I really like the time period, like the way that the characters sort of neuroses kind of tell a story about the time, right? The way that societal and cultural influences affect our own individual anxieties is something very interesting to me. I loved this part right here, and very emblematic, I feel, of, not emblematic is the right word, but very apropos for today. I didn't see any of the war. You must have gathered that from my letters, Franz. That doesn't matter. We have some shell shocks who merely heard an air raid from a distance. We have a few who merely read newspapers. I really like that, especially in this modern day of our connection to war. Next is a mammoth. Yeah. I'm not going to do a whole 30-minute thing on Moby Dick. You've read Moby Dick, or you haven't read Moby Dick, but you know you should read Moby Dick. Okay, let me give you the thing on me and Moby Dick. It's a Bible. Each scene is just, it's set up so well to be such an enjoyable read. That's something that is almost never discussed with Moby Dick. Everything is about this sort of symbolic, 1950 to 1980 literary criticism lens of Moby Dick, where we all kind of know what means this and what means. Forget about all that. This is just a fun read. The sections are so tight and short enough that you're just following him from the moment that he, gets on the ferry to go over to, I think he's in Cape Cod in the beginning. No, yeah, he's in Cape Cod in the beginning. He's trying to get to Nantucket. Maybe he goes to Nantucket. Yeah, goes to Nantucket. From that moment, you're just sort of following this path, this journey. Of course, it's very biblical. It's epic. But the flow of it is just so fantastic. And yes, the middle, there's a lot of stuff about whales. And that stuff, it's incredibly well written. It can be tedious based on your appetite for that kind of thing. This time, sped through a lot of those parts, right? I just wasn't really glommed on to that this time. But there's just an incredible amount of human wisdom right here. And distilled into a book. And I thought about I reread Leaves of Grass every year. And it's interesting to think about those two works together. It's interesting to think about our country, America, at that time that Moby Dick was written. It's interesting to think about what truths are universal and maybe what are kind of left there. I don't know. I wish I had more obviously, at a bar, I could sit and talk to you about Moby Dick or The Whale for a very, very long time. And by the way, I love this version because it's got those illustrations by Rockwell Kent. I'm going to try to find a particularly good one to show you. That one's really black, so you're not going to... Yeah, here's the Noble Savage. All right, so... we're going to talk, I'm rereading The Savage Detectives, okay? And that's to no one's shock, no one's surprise, right? I'm crazy about Bolano. I'm not going to apologize for it. there's going to be phases, right? I'm 41 right now. 10 years ago, it was cool, hip, sexy, all that, and I was at some forefront. Right now, it's probably closer to bro lit, right? In terms of how it's looked upon, and of course, the posthumous release of every notebook scrap that he ever wrote and turning that into a story or a novella is not necessarily helping, right, matters. But let's focus on, on the work. And The Savage Detectives, I'm reading it now. It's so good. It's so exciting to think about poetry in this mythological sense. It's so exciting to think about these kids, running around Mexico City, creating myths of their own making and treating poetry as this divine art and just it's like a fairy tale in Mexico City. The way that the story is told is, of course, fantastic. Like in the beginning, the diaristic entries of the young 17-year-old poet who gets in with the visceral realist really sets sort of the tone, the stage very well. And then the second section, that's Mexicans Lost in Mexico is that section. The second section, The Savage Detectives, where, usually blocks about a page and a half each of different of the characters and friends or whatever kind of fully put the story in so much as there's a story together. But like a lot of Bolano, it's about mood, it's about tension, it's about a lot of things that aren't on the page. There's a lot of mystery that we just know there's a mystery, but what is the mystery? There's points that kind of hint at his other works because there's sort of an interconnectedness there. But at the end of the day, it's just fun. And, I was writing with my friend, the excellent writer, Grant Meyerhofer, who's got some new work coming out that I'm really excited about. But he actually made the point, like, Savage Detectives might be my favorite Bolano. It's like the most fun. And I thought about it more, like 2666, which I've talked about on this channel a lot. And, I think I would have said is my favorite. It's got a whole section that I can't reread. I mean, I've looked through it again, but like, you're not going to sit and reread the parts about the crimes like on its own. Like the parts about the critic, absolutely. Parts about faith, absolutely. Like, but the part about the crimes, like, holy, And so just to like pick up and get that sort of lusty joy of literature again, Savage Detectives is undefeated, tremendous. And I know that I say a lot of times like Third Reich gets underrated, underappreciated, and it does, and I've made a video about it and talk about it, but maybe Savage, I see too often By Night and Chili listed as the book that everyone should start with Bolano. And is it a short? Yeah, it's a short, it's a novella, but like, while there's themes that certainly exist throughout his work, like it's such a standalone, it's a deathbed book, it's got much more of a religiosity to it. Like this deals with the world that he was creating in his head, that he was taking the writing he was doing and his friends were doing and just making it into this sort of, I guess, this fairy tale of poets roaming around Mexico City, these expats, like this just incredibly alluring to readers and writers and lovers of literature world. And he really seemed to like speak it and live it into existence and then also documented it later. And as he documented it later, you get to see it through the eyes of a more experienced person. I don't know. It's just incredible. I can't even give enough. This one is translated. Is this Chris? This one is translated by, it's very difficult to find, which is, of course, a little frustrating. Oh, no, this is Natasha Wimmer. Okay. Chris Andrews and Natasha Wimmer, the two primary translators. That one is Natasha Wimmer. Last thing I'll talk about here is Joan Didion's Slouching Towards Bethlehem. So I am obsessed with California in the 60s and had somehow never read this. I kind of thought that, okay, here's a collection of articles, right? Originally appearing in wherever, Vanity Fair, Playboy, whatever, all paid articles. I guess I thought like, well, how interested am I going to be in reading these contemporary articles, possibly of events or scenes and groups that I have, that I just have a different, I already know about, right? And like, this book was written, 20 years before I was born, so is that kind of nonfiction going to hold up? And the answer is absolutely yes. And in fact, it made me long for the days, which were not that long ago, where long form journalism still had a place and essay style, right? And sort of like, it just, I mean, just this past week, Vice announced they're closing. Like, there's all these spots that used to house that kind of work. And slowly and slowly, they're just not existing anymore as everything pivots to a much shorter form and multimedia format as opposed to the written word. And of course, obviously the longer piece of the written word. But she's able, and through this, she just captures the vibe of California at that time. Obviously, I wasn't even alive, but that's one of those beautiful aspects that you start to realize as you get older is that our histories and our understanding of that come from this, right? It comes from those cultural touchstones, whether it's literature, film, art, or whatever, that survive. And those become more important, perhaps, than, the real lived experience, because these are the things that the next generations pick up on. This right here was not the way that it was to live in the 20s on the French Riviera, but it is to us. This is only one view, right? But it becomes a very, very big view because it is because it's such good work. So it lives on. And in our collective memory, this becomes California in the 60s. And so anyway, I really, really love that. I've never read any Joan Didion fiction, so I think I'm going to do that somewhat soon. Right now, as I'm rereading Savage Detectives, and that is the only book I'm reading. Well, no, I'm reading some poems from Savage Detectives. I got this idea that I had not read L'Autrement, and he talks about him throughout his books. And he's so dirty and whatnot. I think it's right back here. He's kind of like the evil poet, the dirty, So I am reading this, although it's I got to be honest, it's a bit difficult. This one is translated by Guy Wernham, and it's a long poem that is shocking and looking at the nature of evil. But did you like this? Is this like what I should do it from now on? Am I don't know. Do you guys want me to go back to preparing more and doing sort of one book? I would love to know. I mean, the truth is, I've had a hard time, lately. I found that being a man here in middle age, being maybe a person, I don't know. I found that it's a struggle. It's a time of struggle in a sense. This time where I have all these wonderful things in my life. My kids are healthy, happy. My wife is healthy, happy. My parents live right the street from me. But it's a very difficult time because there's so many things pulling at your time, and caring for aging parents, also caring for kids, trying to keep a marriage happy and alive and fulfilling, and work. And then I've got this other piece of me that is truthfully other than my relationships with my family, like the most substantial piece, the part of me that burns, the part of me that yearns, the part of me that just feeds, and that's the artistic side, right? That's the writing. That's this kind of connection. That's the reading. And as I find time dwindling for that in my life with all these sort of other external necessities, I don't know what to do with those hours I do have, like this moment here where I had a lunch break and thought, maybe I'll do a video here. And maybe I should get more routine focused and really like give this a legitimate chance. I mean, certainly like I could probably sell more of my books, right? If I like did this and kept on. And I don't know, there's not a lot of people talking about the books that I talk about in this sort of format. So I don't know. If you subscribe to me, I haven't looked how many I have, what, 200, 300? There's probably like 50 people actually active. If you subscribe to me, if you watch these, let me know in the comments. And I hope you guys are doing well. It's a weird world out there. I mean, I hope you guys are doing well, and take care of yourself.